The Change Officer Podcast's Future of Financial Services series is brought to you by Holy Wallet, the world's first wallet-as-a-service platform. Stay tuned to find out how Holy Wallet can help you build your mobile wallet to increase revenue and reduce time to market.
When you talk about, embedded finance and those types of services, ultimately the realization, and we're quite clear this is happening and will continue to happen, is there are new marketplaces, there are new ecosystems that are gaining prevalence and strength, whether it's ride sharing or Careem, Uber, creating their own infrastructures and then adding payment services within that. I think the reality is, as a bank, you ask yourself, am I going to participate in that market and on what terms?
Welcome to the Change Officer Podcast's Future of Financial Services series. In this series, we are deep diving into some of the hottest and most pivotal topics in the financial services industry right now, including personalization in financial services, embedded finance, and the mobile payment revolution. Join us as we seek the answers to critical questions such as what does the future hold for the financial services sector and where should we look for the next big disruptive idea. Welcome back to another episode of the Change Officer special series, Future of Financial Services. And this time I have a pleasure to host Tristan, Chief Digital Officer of RAKBANK.
Hi, Vuk. How are you?
Good to have you here. I've been looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot happening in this space. It's very active, and I like to try and provide some clarity, if I can.
I'm going to put a challenge out. We have 15 to 20 minutes to summarize a couple of opinions. So I'm going to keep it relatively focused as much as that can be. So skipping the chit chat, we're going to move that to our standard, the Change Officer main track episode, perhaps. I want to talk about, obviously, banking sector. You've been involved in the sector for quite a while in this market, but internationally as well. Obviously, what happened over the previous couple of years, especially previous 2 years, fast-tracked completely the digital behavior and complete customer experience, their expectations, etc. We've seen, a new cohort of customers using digital payments, contactless mobile payments, QR code payments, mushrooming of these pay at the table solutions, etc. However, the death of cash was again exaggerated. We are far from that. So, although some of the worst sort of pandemic forecasts haven't materialized, banks continue to face long-term revenue pressure, right? And tighter competition. There is a lot of digital banks coming in the scene, challenging, traditional banking sector, which is putting a lot of pressure. However, things are not as they seem always. The loud ones doesn't necessarily lead the race. So I would like to hear from you. What's your take on the current state of this industry, the change that is taking place?
So I think you did an interesting thing there where you started in looking at where disruption or entry has happened most in the market, and payments is clearly the standout area of interest where we've seen new providers. Why? The answer is quite straightforward, right? It's a volume business. There's a margin that new competitors can look to gain access to. And there are services that have been improved through payment offerings. So that's been highly profiled, and it's got a lot of attention. Overall, clearly, yes, the pandemic has been a strong accelerator of digitization, and naturally, as access to physical location and other means of exchange became less relevant, then digital became the natural alternative. I'd say overall, many of the banks have been progressing down this step of creating a digital channel and ultimately going to what's called a digital first strategy, where the preference is that the customers, and in fairness for most customers, it's a better service, right? That you can do what you need to, whether it's on an app or whether it's online. So that progress has been, I'd say, consistent across the market, so that for the most part, the majority of retail customers, and more so also the SMEs, are starting to be using digital as their first port of call, and that's matured well. What is still reasonably simplistic is the way in which that service is provided and the way in which data is used to help customers make better decisions, understand their own behaviors, and gain value from that. So I'd say that in the region still we've got quite a good level of coverage at the basic level of service. And what tends to happen is that we still find that under kind of edge cases, or where things are complicated, where it's not the happy path, things don't work so well. And therefore you still need multiple channels. So I'd say, on a global competitive basis, we've got reasonably good digital banking services across the sector. Yes, cash is reducing, and I expect that will continue, and services will fill the gap. But I think you were kind of hinting at a follow-on question about, where are these competitors going to be a few years from now, and how viable are some of those businesses, which maybe that's something we can discuss also.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting topic, because neobanks, digital banks that are coming to the market with certain value propositions that are very appealing for the customers, it's a question whether the underlying sort of infrastructure can deliver something like that, etc. And that's a topic of its own. But it is pushing traditional banks to move faster, right? And to relook the strategy and the next couple of steps. And I think overall it's a good thing. Whether these banks will eventually succeed or not, they are sort of pushing the market. A lot of other things are happening as well. There's a lot of discussion on open banking.
Yes.
There's a lot of discussion on embedded finance.
Yes. Topics
of this kind. And then, as you said, digital delivery of the existing services is one step of improvement. There is all this whole bigger spectrum of new opportunities for the sector, overlapping with other industries as well. If you look at this whole picture, where do you see the biggest opportunities going forward for the banks that are going beyond just digitalizing the delivery of the existing services?
So when you talk about embedded finance and those types of services, ultimately the realization, and we're quite clear this is happening and will continue to happen, is there are new marketplaces, there are new ecosystems that are gaining prevalence and strength, whether it's ride sharing or Kareem, Uber, creating their own infrastructures and then adding payment services within that. I think the reality is, as a bank, you ask yourself, am I going to participate in that market, and on what terms? And obviously, if you own and orchestrate that marketplace, your objective is to extract the maximum rent. So for a bank, it's always complicated because, yes, you might get additional flow, but at what cost? So banks are still, I think, feeling out where to play in that space, and we ourselves at RAKBANK are looking at that, and we see certain opportunities, but it's early days, particularly in this geography. I'd say that overall, the real differentiator that banks have is that we are trusted, we have history, we're highly regulated. And entrants usually see that as impediments and problems and things that they wish they didn't have to do. What I see today is that if you really think about the data that a bank has and what it means in terms of knowing your spending patterns, being able to assist in making better informed decisions about opportunities, maybe around key life events, making more, there is a concept that I haven't really yet seen executed. I believe that it's been done a bit in the US with Bank of America. But the ability to actually give you personalized service at scale. And so I think the big opportunity for the banks is to look to differentiate in that, use that information to start to create highly relevant and personalized experiences. And this has been talked about for a very long time, right?
Yeah.
So it's clearly not easy to execute on.
Yeah.
But I think that is going to be the next stage. And arguably the new entrants are in a strong position to try and prove that value proposition.
It's very interesting, actually, and we haven't covered this sort of in the series so far. Can you unpack this concept a bit more for us, and let's just deep dive a bit under the hood?
So look, ultimately, for most of us, and banking is a highly commoditized industry, right? It's basically a utility service that's provided by a host of different private organizations. It's highly regulated. Product doesn't evolve very much for the most part. What you do know if you start to study it is that customer needs have a certain set of triggers and reasons why they occur. So, for example, you need a personal loan because you're deciding that you want to do some renovations on a house, or you want to go and study. There's always a trigger to a financial need.
Sure.
How does it become possible to know that trigger is going to happen? And how does that then allow a more informed conversation at scale in a world where the human interaction touch points are reducing, right?
I see.
So that process of starting to profile individuals intelligently so that you can engage in a proactive discussion, that's what will make the difference in a highly commoditized industry where the alternative is, it's a price war. It's about throwing money on the table to attract customers. Can I just be smarter? And can I use the information that's actually there to interpret what does that mean? What's Vogt looking for at this point in his growth of his business? Arguably, the answer is that could be done. But then that means banks starting to think in the way that technology companies do, which is not natural.
Yeah. What do you think is the single biggest blocker of that happening tomorrow?
Well, that's a great question, and I've thought about that. What I see is that the way the organizations, the established incumbent organizations are set up, there isn't really somebody who, in most banks, is responsible for the customer relationship, right? You've got somebody who's responsible for the credit card business. You've got somebody who's responsible for selling current accounts or savings accounts. You've got somebody who's responsible for personal loans. You've got somebody who's responsible for mortgages, if we're sticking to the retail business. And they're all individual, right? And therefore, the concept of, how do we use data to manage a relationship and the lifetime value of that relationship with an individual? That only really happens in the higher value affluent segments, where there's enough revenue potential there. So when you take it down to the more mass market or common customer, it just doesn't. That's just not the way the incentives and the individuals are lined up. So it's a huge, it's a massive mind shift to say, okay, right now we're going to invest in creating or curating the key value we have other than the transaction flow, which is we understand this relationship, we've got the data, we know how to make that something much more valuable. And it's just a skill set that just historically hasn't been there.
Hey everyone, sorry for jumping in. We'll be back with the rest of the conversation shortly, but I wanted to take a moment to thank the sponsor of our show, Holy Wally. Within the next 2 years, 4 billion people will be using digital wallets, and the global mobile payments market size is expected to hit US $5.5 billion by 2024. It's more important than ever for financial service providers to offer a digital wallet service to their customers. Enter Holy Wally, the world's first wallet-as-a-service platform that allows any financial service provider to build their own digital wallet as efficiently and cost-effectively as possible. Whether you're a fintech, retailer, banking institution, or insurance carrier, Holy Wally has all the elements you need to build your own company's ideal digital wallet in a matter of minutes and manage it on an ongoing basis. To find out how Hollywally can increase your customer engagement and revenue, or to register for a demo, visit hollywally.com. The link can be found in the show notes of this episode. And now enjoy the rest of this conversation. What would you say? And this cannot be a universal question. There are different sizes of banks, etc. But what is the faster way to reaching the point of delivering this sort of customized, personalized experience for customers? But not only that, but taking the advantage of the data. Is it by building this internally, or completely opening up your APIs and data sets to external fintech players and other players to take the advantage of that data and do it sort of instead of you, but still kind of driving the growth of the bank itself?
That's another very good question. So I think firstly you have to know what the answer is, right? And the answer is that you need to be able to define a profile for different cohorts, different customer types, and understand how that would then get used. And just a short segue, right? I used to run a mobile operator, and it was a pay-as-you-go SIM card. So we didn't know a lot. In the UK, you didn't have to provide identity. We gave all the data to a company that did segmentation for FMCG brands. And then 6 weeks later, they come back, they say, hey, look, in 48 hours, we can give you a 97% confidence that we can pre-profile into 12 different usage segments. And the first answer was like, hey, that's great. But then the reality was, hey, that's useless, because we didn't have a way to communicate to 12 segments. Mm-hmm. And so it took 3 years to get to the point where we were able to then use that information to tailor our messaging. So I think first it starts with, could you use the data in the way you interact within the operating model that you have now? And that's probably the more complex, rewiring activity. Then is there somebody out there who could do a smarter job of manipulating and curating the data? Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be a very rich opportunity for partnership. And I was just speaking with the Chief Innovation Officer at MasterCard about this yesterday evening. And I think there's, that's the space where there will be a need to look at bringing together data sets that don't only exist within the bank and the analytical and capabilities to then make sense of it. Mm.
Obviously, there are ups and downs in the pace in which every industry, but specifically this industry, is transforming. And this industry has been transforming very rapidly. But it is loud at the same time. Yeah. But it's, undoubtedly it's going to happen fast. Like transformation is happening fast, and year by year we're just accelerating. How fast do banks need to pivot and reboot their strategies in order to stay relevant? I think this is also sort of a clickbait, you need to transform, you're either going to do a digital or you're going to die, etc. and stuff like that. I'm personally not buying into that because I understand how business works, but 99% of people don't. And they do buy into this messaging, but there is something underneath. It's not completely false.
So I think the positive of the investment flow that went into fintech is what you mentioned at the beginning, right? It has been an accelerator of value improvement and value creation, often for end users. The negative is that a lot of those business models make no sense whatsoever, right? And they will not be viable, and they're not viable today, and they're not viable in an environment where you don't have basically free capital. And interest rates go up, and all of a sudden you ask yourself, okay, is this going to pay back? So I think, the process of deciding where and how to create the next version, the enhancements, the reality is the banks are the incumbents, right? They're going to be here. What you find is that in practice, there's a lot of complexity complying with regulation. There's a lot of actual value in making sure that those checks and balances are in place. And often the entrants haven't done that correctly. So I don't think that banks are going to go away. As I think it was our friend Arjun was saying the other day, people don't want banks, they want banking. I don't know if that's necessarily true, right? Ultimately, what you want to know is my money's somewhere that I can rely on. That institution's going to be reliable. If I've got a problem, they'll be able to help me out. And guess what? Most of us still need to get paid, and we need to make payments. And you need to know, okay, what's my balance that's left in the behind that? So I think that it's kind of self-serving jargon when people say banks are going to go away, and I don't expect that.
Yeah. No, I believe obviously they're not going away. I think, on the surface, 99% of people are interacting with the bank with its most basic and least profitable product, which is
spot on,
just a bank account.
Yeah.
While this 1% are dealing with other products that are difficult to deliver if you're not a bank.
Right.
And a lot of players coming into the game, so-called neobanks, mobile payments, digital payments, etc., are getting close to perhaps solving the problem for the 99% that are still unbanked, underbanked in most of the parts of the world. While this 1% where the real business is still relatively far away. Now, I guess things do need to change, and your position as a bank can drop unless you act, right, and sort of change.
Yeah, look, I think that's there's a implicit question within that, which is, look, where is banking not serving the customer, right? And what I find is I use this analogy, which is the way I look at what most happens in banking today, which is you're asked to go driving in a car at night with only a rear view mirror, because the information you get is just about what's happened, right? There's no turn on the headlights, show me where I'm going. So I think at one level, most banks, look, can you get paid? Can you have your balance? Can you make payments? The reality is that works pretty well. What is not great is when you say, okay, well, help me to understand what's going on, help me become financially literate and help me to make better choices. That's not covered, I don't think. That's not being in the service offering. And then what I've also found is, as you say, not whether it's the 1% or the more sophisticated transactions, the system can fall apart pretty quickly in terms of just becoming massively complex. I had to request a payment from the UK recently to send money back here, and my bank in the UK said, "Could you come into a branch?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm in Dubai," and they're like, "Yeah," and then they said, "Okay, you can send us the instruction." I said, "Okay, yeah, it's a digital world. Send it by fax." So that's the point at which I got in my DeLorean and got in a time machine and found a fax.
I'm sure plenty of people who are currently listening are empathizing with you, because they're all going through very similar scenarios. All right, to wrap up, I know that you have a bit of entrepreneurial spirit within you. You're currently working with a bank, but if you would have another 8 hours in your day or more, entrepreneurs know that 8 hours is just not enough. But if you have a parallel life, and you would decide to go for a new business, big massive opportunity, or not, it depends on you. But where would you look, or what is the problem that you would try to solve, which is this $1 million problem or $1 billion company worth solving? Where would you look at? Do you have anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I think, look, continuing on the theme of data and the digitization of the world, it's been a concept which I think is becoming viable just now, which is, what about creating your digital self, not a digital twin, but the identity information that's important about you, that would then enable you as an individual to have an agent go and do things for you in the market. In the UK, we've got a lot of price comparison websites, and that means that you go there and you basically try and optimize your best purchase in the market. But that's a buyer going to a marketplace. What about creating a service where you choose to provide the right level of information so an agent can now go and shop, can now go and scan the market, can do things? I think that has viability. That could be a really powerful system where you'd say, right, I've basically got a professional shopper for me who does and when they make selections, I know that they're going to fit and work for me, and I also know that the price has been optimized by being able to scan the market effectively.
And does something of that kind exist around the world at this stage?
It's still early stages as a concept, and it's quite complex because we think about the level of data disclosure and confidence in and trust around that. But it's been discussed for some time as a potential next stage in evolution of how commerce would take place and how the individual becomes more. How does your data become your asset?
Very interesting. Tristan, thanks for taking the time,
Thank you so much.
Sharing your wisdom with us and predictions. Look, I hope that we're going to stick around long enough in the industry to see how things will develop, because I assume it's going to be very interesting sitting in 2035 and reflecting back on 2022, thinking about everything that was said these days.
Listen, it just won't be the same. I can't believe it'll still be the same. The power of technology and data and services to become predictive and personalized, that will eventually start to be the norm.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not going to be like with flying cars.
I think we've got that on the roadmap here, don't we?
For a while now.
Yeah.
Tristan, thanks again.
Thanks.
It was a pleasure.
Cheers.